Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast, coming to you from the beautiful Reading with Your Kids studios in the lovely neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are blasting off and taking you to the moon to celebrate the 50th anniversary of man landing on the moon. We'll be speaking today to Karen Jameson. She is the author of a beautiful new picture book called Moon Babies. Before this episode blasts off into outer space, we want to let you know that the podcast is being sponsored today by the wonderful books of Nita Clark and Kathy Doherty. These titles include There Are No Fireflies in Montana, Why Do Dandelions Grow, I Hate Numbers, and The Royal Search for Shenanigans. Nita Clark and her daughter Kathy Doherty are two of our favorite guests. To say that Nita is an active senior citizen who lived a fascinating life would be an understatement. Nita has held many fascinating roles in her over 80 years of life. She's a wife, a mom, a grandmom, and an elementary school librarian, and an entrepreneur, too. The latest book from this mother-daughter team is called There Are No Fireflies in Montana. And now this is a really cute story. A young girl is curious as to why there are no fireflies in Montana. She starts by asking her mother why her mom thinks there are no fireflies in Montana, goes through her entire family, and ends with her brother giving a really, really interesting explanation. It's a great launching pad for you to talk about with your family about why they think there are no fireflies in Montana. These are some fantastic books that you and your family will absolutely love. Check them out today. There Are No Fireflies in Montana, Why Do Dandelions Grow, I Hate Numbers, and The Royal Search for Shenanigans, the books of Nita Clark and Kathy Doherty. We also want to let you know that this episode of the Reading with Your Kids podcast is brought to you by the last surviving dinosaur, the Tarantacranchosaurus, written by Stephen Joseph. Reading with your kids is oftentimes about reading out loud with your kids. And what would make for a better read out loud book than a book that has 6 cranky relatives, 3 mean dinosaurs, and 1 very cranky Tarantacranchosaurus? This book tells the tale of how the dinosaurs became extinct, and not in the life-ending meteor shower way the paleontologists often tell us. The Tarantacranchosaurus is so cranky that she makes all the other bigger and meaner dinosaurs disappear. That is, until she comes across the only dinosaur who is immune to her incessant complaining, the Tarantacranchosaurus. These two dinosaurs evolved into humans, and that's where cranky people came from. Throughout the illustrated book, family members and dinosaurs humorously battle to have the best sauruses. That's a Yiddish word for big, really big problems. And these problems include warts, alligator attacks, and brain tumors. Now, we think one of the best things about this book is that it's not just for cranky kids. As the storyteller says in the end, even mommies and daddies can be Crankosauruses and Kvetchosauruses sometimes. As it turns out, everyone has a bit of Tarantacranchosaurus and Tarantacranchosaurus in him or her. The last surviving dinosaur reminds readers to be mindful of when and how often they complain, a lesson from which all readers, young and old, can benefit. It's available online on Amazon, Barnes & Nobles, and many other sites where books are sold. It's the last surviving dinosaur, the Tarantacranchosaurus. This episode of the podcast is also brought to you by The Adventures of Johnny Pocket Band, Battle of the Bands by Linda Phelps. Do you know a tween or a teen who struggles with stress and anxiety? If you answered yes, let me suggest a perfect fun summer read, The Adventures of Johnny Pocket Band by Linda Phelps. Johnny and his brother Drummer Boy are excited to compete in the Battle of the Bands. They have 2 months to get the band prepared, but everybody is way nervous. Johnny has promised himself that he will conquer his anxiety this year and start to have fun. And you know, with the help of his friends, he just might be able to do it. This story captures the emotions, fears, and excitement of the preteen years. It's a difficult time for everyone, but this story opens a window of understanding as each kid shares their thoughts about fitting in, making friends, and the really unsettling feeling we get when we discover that we're attracted to girls. This is a fantastic read for all families. The Adventures of Johnny Pocket Band, Battle of the Bands, is available on Amazon or by going to Linda's website, johnnypocket.net. The Adventures of Johnny Pocket Band, Battle of the Bands by Linda Phelps. Joining us right now from Southern California, she's touching down to help us celebrate the 50th anniversary of man landing on the moon, actually touching down and walking on the moon. Such an incredible moment in my life. I remember it so well. She's the author of a beautiful, beautiful book that was just published called Moon Babies. Please welcome to the show, Karen Jameson. Karen, how are you?
Oh, I'm doing well. Thank you for having me on the show.
I just love, as I said, we're recording this early, and I just received my advanced copy of Moon Babies, and it's an absolutely beautiful book. This is a book that I can easily imagine reading with my kids over and over and over again. It's just the illustrations are beautiful. The verses and the rhymes are also beautiful. And congratulations.
Well, thank you. I'm really pleased how it turned out. And as the author, when I sold the book, I had no idea what the illustrations would be like, who the illustrator would be. And in fact, the biggest question I was asked, first by my agent and then by the editor and then by the art director was, what do they look like? What does a moon baby look like? And I had to answer like, I just don't know, because they tell us, whenever you go to writing seminars that with picture books, the author is supposed to leave room for the illustrator to envision the art. And so I just didn't even think about that. I did the word part, and I just trusted that it would come out. But the other big question was, do they have arms and legs? Because they're moons, right? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, I suppose they must be able to do their moonwalks and things that they do. So I was really delighted when I saw the art, because the illustrator, Amy Hevron, did a lovely job, and she does her art with acrylics on board. So she's painting on board, and you can see in the cover even that she leaves sections of the board exposed in the art. Mm-hmm. So it makes a very interesting and cool style, and I love the colors. The blues and the purples feel very space-like.
Yeah, and that's, you touch on something we've talked about a lot here on the podcast, and it's just that whole, the necessity as an author to kind of trust the publisher and trust the illustrator and just kind of hand off, okay, here you go, I created this, this is my baby, but now it's time for you to dress it and make it come to life. Yes,
but I was very fortunate. I came out so much better than I ever imagined. So it's kind of a gift.
Yeah. Now this is being published by Penguin Random House, correct?
Yes. Well, it's Putnam, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. Yes.
And they're releasing it right around the anniversary of the United States landing men on the moon and that monumental time. Was that in your mind when you were creating Moon Babies?
It wasn't in my mind consciously at the time. But of course, growing up, I remember the moon landing happening. I was a kid when it happened, and I remember all the excitement and just all the flights of imagination that came from that, all the songs and the literature and the movies and everything. And so that's just kind of part of what I grew up with is imagining about the moon. So I think that was in the back of my mind. Mm-hmm. But the timing certainly worked out well. And in my book, we've got the moon babies doing things like the moonwalks and playing with moonstones, which the astronauts, collected samples of moons that they're doing could be, taken from there, some of the vocabulary that we got, from the moon landing. And, anyway, and then the illustrator surprised me by drawing an astronaut doll, into the story. And one of the moon babies takes the astronaut doll through the whole story. So, yeah, you can just imagine, well, maybe if this was a real moon world, maybe they saw the astronauts.
Talk a little bit about that time, because I too remember that time, and I was telling Karen beforehand, me and my cousins went to see a cheesy Godzilla movie in the morning, and when we came out and jumped into the car to go back home, we actually listened to the landing, and it wasn't, you couldn't see it because obviously there were no cameras on the moon at the time, but we heard the radio transmissions from the astronauts to mission control, and just hearing this. And I remember when it touched down, and then later seeing the video of Neil Armstrong jumping down onto the moon, and talk about there was a real sense of imagination and accomplishment and at that time.
Well, I remember that my parents called my brothers and I in. We were outside playing, and they called us in. And back then there were 3 channels on the television, and that was it. And every channel was the moon landing for hours and hours and hours. And we came in, and my parents were so excited, and they were saying, you're witnessing a moment in history. Never before has this happened. And I think, being kids, we were impressed for about 10 minutes, and then we went out to play. We did not quite realize what that moment meant, but we did realize the whole point about it being such a dream, and that if man can walk on the moon, then what else can we do? Like, the possibilities are open to imagine all kinds of things.
And just look from where we are. I know your publicist, Janie, when we first started arranging this conversation, I too told her that, we watched it on the only 3 channels that we had available to us. And
yes.
I'm not sure how old Janie is, but she was really surprised about that. That there are only 3 channels. And, but, yes, we have the communications. You and I are actually looking at each other, through the magic of Skype while we're having this conversation. And I remember, was it Dick Tracy that had the little wristwatch, the little radio wristwatch where you could kind of look and he'd communicate. So all these things that we were dreaming of as kids have come true.
Yes. I could not have imagined the technology that we have now, but the whole thing about the moon landing, I think what made it really special was that it was a goal as a nation, that we were going to do this, and everybody was invested in it, and it felt like a unifying thing that it brought everybody together.
Yeah, because we were all drinking Tang.
Yes. And then as a teenager, I live in the Los Angeles area, and so we would go to Griffith Observatory, and they had these laserium shows with Dark Side of the Moon playing, and they'd have all these moon images, and that was a big thing to do on a weekend, to go up there at night.
As you're saying that, we have a planetarium here in Boston too, and there was something that you did on a Friday night. It was date night. You would go to the planetarium, and there'd be like a laser show in addition to the stars. And we seem to have lost some of that love affair that we had with space in some ways. I don't hear kids talking about that as much as we heard it when we were young.
Yeah, I think too, with the budget of what it costs for the space programs and everything that it's kind of fallen out of favor with the public, with so many other big issues and, poverty and homelessness and other things that people feel our nation's dollars should be spent on. So it's harder to get public support for these moon programs. And I think too, kids like my own children grew up with all kinds of movies like Star Wars and music, movies, and books, all about space. So maybe, and of course, computer games. So maybe, they've got everything in front of them on a screen. So it's not quite as precious as it was to us when we only had our 3 channels.
Right. Yes. Neil Armstrong jumping off the ladder onto the surface of the moon. It was exciting, but it kind of pales in comparison to some of the special effects you see in movies these days. Yeah.
Yes, true. But I think kids are still fascinated with space. And I'm a retired teacher. I taught elementary school for over 30 years. And one of the favorite units of all year would be the solar system. Kids really got into that. And they would be really surprised to find out that there's more than one moon. And some people asked me that when I said moon babies. Or, well, what do you mean moon babies? There's only one moon. Well, no. There are other moons in the universe. And then there's the concept of a new moon, which to kids might sound like a different moon every time, although it's not.
Right.
But, yeah.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about your experience as a teacher and how important it was, how important you believe reading with our kids is.
Oh my gosh, I can't state it too strongly. For some of the kids, I taught in a school that had a lot of minority students who were underprivileged. They didn't have books at home, many of them, and a lot of them didn't have parents who could even read. Or if they could read, it was in a different language. So just getting that language development, that love of story, that connection is so important, especially in the elementary years. So when I was a teacher, I always had, every afternoon after lunch, we always did read aloud. And they had silent reading time where they could pick their own books and just follow their interests and get excited about reading, because it's those reading skills that are that they learn early on that help them with that other academic reading later. But it's also, encouraging imagination, being able to go into that world like a little time capsule, when you enter a story and you get caught up in it. It's so important to encourage that. And we used to do book commercials in my class where the kids would come up and talk about a book they'd read and try to sell it to the class, and then once they'd told about it and we'd have those books up on the chalkboard ledge, people were checking them out all the time. It's just a matter of being that voice and exposing kids to literature.
It really is important. And one of the things you just brought up is something that my wife, who is a teacher in Boston Public School systems, and her best friend, who is a principal in the system, reminded me of, is that there are a lot of kids in inner city schools or a lot of kids in suburban schools whose parents aren't able to read, or parents aren't able to read in English, or unfortunately parents just don't have the time or unfortunately the interest in reading with their kids. As someone who experienced the moon landing, I don't want to say how many decades ago, but I'm getting to the point where, I don't know if I want to be traveling, doing 250 shows a year with my educational magic show. And maybe it's time to slow down a little bit, but I still want to contribute to kids. Is there a way for folks who are retired to kind of support that and kind of supplement for those kids in those type of school settings, go in and kind of help out and perhaps read to kids in classrooms?
There's all kinds of programs where you can go in and be what they call like a reading angel and a reading buddy, and do a one-on-one type of thing. And also, so many children's authors go out and do school visits, even in their own communities, if they don't go out traveling. But I'm planning to do school visits. And, next week I'm going into, a local school to do a few practice ones since I have my one copy of my book right now. It's not out yet, but I'm going to go practice and read to some kids and do some activities and just, have some fun with it. Yeah. But I think, just being willing to go read at a library or, making yourself available. And since I don't have the schedule of having a regular job, mm-hmm. I'm more able to take that on.
Mm-hmm. Now, one of the things about Moon Babies, and like I said, I literally received it about an hour before we started our conversation, and I was able to look through it, and I love the illustrations, but I also love the verse. It's really fun, and I imagine this would just be a fun book to read with kids. It's just that kind of, it's almost like a song. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but you said you were going to go in and practice as well. Would you like to practice maybe reading a couple of pages from the book right now for our audience?
Well, of course, if I must, you twist my arm. Yeah. And just I wanted to mention, I wrote this story first in what they call a monorhyme, which means that every stanza had to have 4 end rhymes, which was not working. So I had to redo the whole rhyme scheme. Uh-huh. And I'm really pleased with how it turned out.
That's great.
So, okay.
All right.
In the starry dark of night, a secret moon world comes to light. Make a wish, and you just might visit baby moons tonight. Crescent cradles hang in rows. In each pod, a small orb glows. Safe and snug, nestled deep. This is where the moon babes sleep. So it goes on like that, and mm-hmm. the moon babies go through this is like the day in the life mm-hmm. of a moon baby. Mm-hmm. And they get to do all kinds of fun things.
Yeah.
And in fact, that was when I was brainstorming what they were going to do, I had lists and lists of all kinds of cool stuff they could be doing up in space. Yeah. So I'm hoping I get to do a sequel so I can include all those other things down the line.
Well, as you were reading and talking about the moon baby snug, I just imagined my daughter when she was younger. I know that at that line she would have just snuggled up even closer to me as I was reading the book to her.
Yeah, that's kind of an underlying theme that, kids want to know that wherever they are in the world, even if you're out there in space and you're a moon baby, you want to feel safe in the world. Mm-hmm. You want to feel loved and cared for. And I think that's kind of a universal theme.
And that's one of the reasons I love this is it is this universal theme, and we talk a lot about the importance of representation in books and kids seeing themselves in books. But one of the neat things about Moon Babies is I think that kids can relate to Moon Babies no matter what culture they're from or what race they're from, because they're moon babies. They're not people. They're moon yes. babies, and they're cool, and they feel safe and snug.
Yes. That's the one thing being a children's author, that you can make your characters be anything, mm-hmm. and you don't have to worry as long as you have some of the emotion and the feelings in there that are common or universal. I think it can resonate with anybody.
Well, speaking of that, before you go, I was just wondering, as you taught for many, many decades, being a children's author, is that something that you always dreamed of, or was it just something you decided to pick up?
Well, I've always loved literature, and then being a teacher and being able to just immerse myself in children's literature all those years, I fell in love with it again. And as a parent with my kids, and I've always wanted to write since I was young. But of course, grown-up responsibilities got in the way. And And when I got close to retirement age, I started to think, maybe now's the time to jumpstart that writing dream I've always had.
Mm-hmm.
And my kids were, finishing up college, and, we didn't have the parent responsibilities that we had before either. So I found myself with the time
mm-hmm.
to do it. And of course, even though I was ready to try something new and outside of the classroom, I always wanted to do something to promote literature.
Mm-hmm.
So this has been really wonderful for me.
Yeah.
A whole new, my second act.
Well, it's a beautiful second act, and I really love it. And we're talking about parents who have trouble reading, and I may be completely wrong about this, but I think that Moon Babies would be a really fun book for a parent that's kind of, learning how to read, to read with their kids, because it does have the rhyme and the rhythm, and it's something that it just might be easier for them to kind of slide in and read with their kids.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, I hope so. And with, everybody loves a bedtime book.
Mm-hmm.
Parents and kids at the end of the day give you that time to connect and have that little quiet moment before the child goes off to sleep. And there's a huge rereadability factor
mm-hmm.
there too, because kids will find a few favorites that they'll want to hear over and over again at bedtime. So it becomes like the security blanket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I know with my kids, one of my boys loved Runaway Bunny.
Uh-huh.
And we read that over and over and over again. And, it was every night.
Well, I remember.
I hope somebody feels that way about Moon Babies.
Absolutely. Well, I remember my kids used to like me to read Fox and Socks.
Oh my gosh.
And that was a real challenge because I have a bit of a speech impediment, and it really is bad with F's.
Oh no. I actually took that book out of my classroom library and hid it because I didn't want to have to read it again.
I should have done that. They would all come on and go, no, it's a great book, but I can't. It's just too hard. My voice would be like, oh. But Moon Babies is absolutely the opposite. It's a fun book that is just really, like I said, I just imagine as you were reading that verse, just imagining my daughter just snuggling up closer to me. And just think of all the neat conversations that we can have looking at the pictures and as we read it over and over again, the kids start reading it with us and remembering what the words are, and then they can just kind of finish, and that really, finish a line, and that really empowers them, and gives them a sense that even though they might be 3 or 4 years old and they're not really reading, that, yeah, you're reading, and this is the start of it. And so I'm really excited for you, and I can't wait for you to experience and hear some feedback from those kids that you're reading the book to.
Yeah, it's something I'm really looking forward to, and I'm also excited because I was able to book reading at the Kid Space Museum out here for the day before the moon landing, so I'll get to connect with some kids there, and who knows, just starting out with this author thing, and hopefully I'll be doing more.
Hopefully it will blast off,
yes.
And we'll have you back on the show. There you go.
My career.
Well, we're really excited. I can imagine. I'm just looking ahead into the future, and someday they're going to be interviewing an astronaut, and she will say, "I was inspired when my mom read me Moon Babies when I was a kid."
Oh, I love that. Let's hope.
We've been talking today to the author of Moon Babies, a brand new book from Putnam, and our guest, the author Karen Jameson. Karen, thank you so much for being part of our show.
Thank you.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Demosa Weber-Bay. She's coming to us from Scholastic. You know about Scholastic. They have this great summer program called the Readapalooza. She's going to be talking to us about the Readapalooza, how we can participate, how our families can participate, and how our family's participation can help other kids. It's a great episode. You do not want to miss it. Hey, if you are an author of a great children's book, maybe you want to be a guest on the Reading with Your Kids podcast and help us create a Don't Want to Miss episode. It's a great way to tell the world about your fantastic book. It's fun. It's easy. And all you need to do is to go to our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the contact button. Let us know about your great book. We'll let you know the next easy steps. We want to thank the people who made today's show possible. Our guest, Karen Jameson. Be sure to check out Moon Babies. We also want to thank our sponsors, Linda Phelps. Be sure to check out Johnny Pocket Band, Battle of the Bands. Stephen Joseph and his hilarious book, The Last Surviving Dinosaur, the Tyrannosaurus. And, of course, we want to thank Nita Clark and Kathy Doherty. Be sure to check out their books. There are no fireflies in Montana. I hate numbers. Why do dandelions grow? And the Royal Search for Shenanigans. I also want to thank my amazing producer, Fatima Khan. Be sure to check out her blog at our website, readingwithyourkids.com. I also want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support that she gives me. And, of course, I want to thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Spotify, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, Podbean, Himalaya, wherever you find your podcast. I also want to thank you for taking the time to make the world a better place. And you do that every time you read with your kids. I'll be looking for you on the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.